Hi, Marei. Thanks for joining me, friend.
Hey, Tasshin. Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
hmm It's so nice to see you again. We just spent some time together in person for a week or so, and uh, yeah, I met you earlier this year, and we became fast friends. I've really enjoyed our friendship developing and getting to know you and learning from you and playing alongside you. And uh, I was thinking the other day, like, wow, I think I've only known you for 5 or 6 months, but it's felt like a very long time that I've had you in my life. And um, it's just been such a blessing to get to know you. And so I'm excited to have this conversation to understand you better and learn more about you and your life and also share you with the world. I think you're a very, very special soul and you have so much to give. So it's a pleasure and a privilege to have this time with you to learn about you and ask you questions. So I really appreciate you making the time. And Um, to that end, I'd love to ask you the question I ask everyone to start, which is about your life story. And I do realize it's a big question, but you get to answer however you like. There's no wrong way. And for me, so many of the specific questions that I want to ask someone, like often there's specific things I want to talk to someone about, as there are in your case, but I like to frame them in the context of who someone is and what they've experienced and what their life has been like, because it really helps me understand the specifics to kind of zoom out and see the bigger picture. And I find that our the topics we're interested in and the things we're good at and the things we care about are because of the stories we've had in our life and the experience we've had. And we become interested in those things from a vantage point of what we've experienced in our life. So I like to start there and then zoom into particular topics and particular questions. So I'd love to hear from you. Anything you'd like to share about your life so far, what you've experienced and what you've gone through and what you've learned. Feel free to make it a short or a long answer, a playful one or a literal one, whatever feels best to you. Can't go wrong. I'd love to hear it.
Mm. Yeah, that feels actually really nice to receive. And um, I think something often spend time feeling or sensing the way myself of, oh, yeah, a lot of things, like just the people I met or the things I experienced seem to have really impacted me. And um, I keep finding new things as I talk myself through it, anyways, myself. So it does feel like a gift to receive that and have a space to explore that. Yeah, it's likely gonna be quite non-linear, um, which I like myself. Like I keep having these like knots and like suddenly seeing something or being thrown back into a situation in my past and suddenly realizing what it meant. I'm as I'm like thinking of like why did it even start? Um, I think it just points towards like when people ask me where I'm from, it's like I'm not quite sure what to even say, or it feels like it's been in a lot of different places, and I've had many times to experience that my physical reality changed so much that I'm not quite sure what's still the same or where did I even start. But I was born in Hamburg, in the suburbs of Hamburg in northern Germany, and spent my whole childhood and adolescence there until I finished high school. And yeah, I was born to a German mother. My father's Danish, and I have an older brother. And yeah, kind of went about kind of growing up. I think as children do is like, yeah, that's the only reality I knew. Um, so I wasn't thinking much about it. I think I was a fairly joyful child that was quite radiant always, and remember the first years as quite playful and quite bright. Um, I also have, I think my first memories are of like being on playgrounds with other kids from the neighborhood or my brother. And I just mostly remember it as, oh, nobody cared where we were actually at or like where we were or when we came home, as long as we kind of came home in a normal time. And we would have like all kinds of adventures and I don't know, come home completely dirty or completely wet or somebody fell into something or we would keep building these clubhouses in nature and just having a lot of joyful time in the forests with different kids. And I also remember some of my first memories are from physical pain or like weird ailments in my body of like, oh, why is my one leg weirdly long or like longer than the other? Why do I keep having pain in different places? Which I always find quite fascinating when I talk about my physical pain nowadays of like, oh yeah, that's actually pain I've had since I've been 4 or 5 or 6 or something. So those are also some key memories of, okay, that was just kind of there. I didn't think too much back then. It wasn't big pain, but it was noticeable as a child. And went to kindergarten, went to school. I think the first maybe like 8 years or something, 7 years, felt like there wasn't that much happening. It was just kind of easy, kind of just going, happening. I had friends, I had a good time. And I think that's when I then started to maybe notice that, oh, in my family it wasn't just smooth. I think my parents probably slowly moved towards the divorce that kind of unfolded over many years until I was a teenager. And that was noticeable as a child. Just like, oh, there's more conflict or more tension at home. It took me some years as a child to notice that, I think, and that took me until I was an adult or a teenager to notice to what degree that was happening and to what degree there were different challenges in my family home. And as a child, I just kind of thought that was normal, I think, or a teenager. But I think it started really impacting me and impacting me in ways that I only realized later. You know what happened next? My early child was a bit more vague. I think one big thing that happened and that I'm still realizing how big it was is I got a dog when I was 8. My parents never really wanted us to have a dog, so they were like, my mom agreed to buy us a bird instead because that was a bit easier. And then as we looked at birds, she was like, I don't actually want a bird, I want a dog. And we completely spontaneously one evening just went out and bought a dog. And I remember coming home, like having the dog on my lap and being like, this is weird. Like within one day or like within these 2 hours, my reality just kind of changed. And now I have a dog and it's the thing I always wanted and I actually got it. And I remember just having spent lots and lots of hours with that dog and yeah, loved it absolutely as a child, or as an adult also. And that kind of happened again, but at a bigger scale when I was 10 or 11 and my parents bought me a pony, which seems like same thing again. Like, I think I knew a month before we looked at the pony that we would buy it. And that again was like an experience of like, holy shit, like that's the thing I most absolutely wanted at that age. And it seems so unrealistic. And my parents actually did do that and buy me a pony. And that felt wild. And again, like a weird reality shift of just like, I would go about my life and then one day I would suddenly have a pony. And I remember standing there the first day and being like, so what do you do with a pony all day? Like I know how to do horseback riding and I was 11, but I was like, what do you feed it and like how much and like and they would like my parents would help me and the stable and everything, but I remember just being like, oh, that's a lot of responsibility, and how do I actually do that? And I haven't really thought about it before I was in this situation. I remember it was a really fun period, figuring that out as well. And I think that all speaks to like the very bright side of my childhood, and very grateful for my parents for that. And I think there were some key lessons that I learned from my parents where I think they're quite liberal, is how I would describe them. And the way it showed up is that um, they wouldn't have many rules for us. As I realized, like even as a kid, I realized that when I saw the friends' parents, for example. And I think my parents, the way I remember it, I don't know if it was literally like this. I think though, I think so though. Um, the context I remember as a child was there are no rules except every animal they buy for me I have to take care of, and I have to finish high school. And the high school thing was relevant because in Germany they split kids at a young age into different schools. So a lot of kids don't actually go to high school, but they go to other schools that just don't prepare you for university, which is, yeah, it's a shitty school system, I think, and it's a bit cruel. But because my brother and me showed that we were intelligent at a quite young age, I think that's where my parents kind of made up that rule. Because they're like, oh, you're intelligent. That's the reason we actually expect you to finish high school. And I think that taught me at a quite young age, it gave me like the sense of what's reasonable. It's like my parents didn't actually mind whether I came home late or was just out and about with my friends all the time and didn't actually really do my homework. As long as it would like get me through high school, because that's what I cared about. So I think I just felt understood as a kid in that of like, oh, cool, I don't actually need to do a lot of nonsense because a lot of rules are just actually perceived and still perceived as nonsensical. Um, I had the sense of, cool, yeah, they care about what really matters, and everything else, I'm actually just allowed to do kind of what I want. Um, I think there's also a shadow side to it of like, I didn't really learn much structure. I think I felt a bit alone as a kid with certain things, so having to figure them out on my own. Um, but it always imprinted a very strong longing for focus on what matters and everything else I don't want to get distracted by. And the sense of reasonable rules and everything else doesn't actually matter. Um, the bright side of my childhood was also really that I would just spend so much time with my pony and with my dog, and often with both of them, out in nature, and they were really close to our house, and that was just a really good way of like keeping me occupied, keeping me in company, keeping me kind of regulated. And because, yeah, dogs, but particularly horses are actually super sensitive and really good when the nervous system's kind of triggered or traumatized in a way. So I would just spend every day there for hours and buffed it. Um, my parents also had this thing where like whatever me and my brother wanted to try, we were allowed to do. Or like they would, I just grew up with financial stability or safety in that sense, or abundance. And I would play tennis, and I would, we learned a couple of music instruments, and whatever we wanted to try out, we were always allowed to do that. And I think I just did a lot of sports back then. Played tennis, horseback riding every day, biking, running, and just loved literally just doing something all the time. My parents were also really active. I think I really learned that. And I started going to high school when I was 10, which is about my age in Germany, and went to some kind of very old school, elite high school that had that kind of, that's what it was known for. And it was quite strict. And I think there I actually experienced a lot of the opposite of what I knew from my parents with the reasonable rules. It's like suddenly there was all this hierarchy and all these rules, and some rules just for the sake of rules, which I really strongly disliked. And German high schools are still quite old school, I would say. And we didn't use we hardly ever used computers, and you would still have to get up to greet the teacher and have to address them with their last name. It's a bit more formal than what I experienced later in my life, and I think it kind of took a lot of the joy out of learning for me, actually. I went to high school and I always made sure that my grades are just good enough to at least stay there without being bothered. But I didn't actually want to have to do the things I had to do often. And I also had some subjects that I just absolutely loved. Like I was really into languages. I was really into Latin, had many years of Latin, and sports and those things. So I also had really good experiences there of just how much I loved learning. And yeah, things started to become a bit more challenging then, I think, when I was like about 10 and upwards, just in my family home and with the tensions. And I think my brother was a bit challenged in a conventional school. Like I kind of grew up with this brother who was the special kid in every meaning of that word, like just highly intelligent, very easily, at a very young age, tested for his IQ that was like really, really high, and had special schools on Saturdays and all kinds of possibilities, but also just a lot of challenges. And I think my experience was a bit that took a lot of focus because my parents were kind of dealing with that, and I think that was just kind of how it felt at that age at home. Like, oh, things are a bit tense or things are a bit challenging, but I don't quite know what is actually challenging. And there's a lot of focus that kind of goes to something else than me, I think. Maybe also because I had an easier time in school than him. And yeah. So I think my experience was that, it's easier if I just kind of go about my day and I do all these sports and I'm kind of not much home, actually. Because then things were easy and joyful and good. Something shifted drastically when I was 13, and I had a small accident with my horse. And it wasn't something too drastic, and I could actually get back on the horse immediately, but I would go to hospital later that day, and I think I fell in an unlucky way while like jumping over an obstacle, and got myself a concussion and fell on my spine in my neck. And everything was checked immediately, and the immediate thing was waiting for the concussion to go away, and then I think I got physiotherapy immediately. But somehow that accident just kind of actually kickstarted like a whole once in a lifetime of physical pain. And I think it kickstarted it. Imagine it could also have happened otherwise. I started having, from that day on, quite a lot of pain, like every day. And that went on for over a year, maybe 2 years, but it was quite strong pain to the degree that I would be on painkillers most days. And then obviously have a lot of symptoms because of taking painkillers every day, which is quite impactful for the gut system. And I remember the first period is quite bad, and like sudden change in my life, because I had this life where I think I think things were okay because I just kept being out of the house and, like running a lot, which always gave me this strong runner high. I was biking, I was in nature, I was in the sun, I was with my horse, my pony, and my dog. And then suddenly I would have this pain, and that would literally mean that I couldn't do anything because it got unbearable if I would move. So suddenly I wouldn't have that anymore, and I would kind of lie in bed. But then different pain would start happening just from lying every day. Um, so I remember at least a couple of months of just trying to move between very slow walking, sitting, and lying, and just kind of rotating so that the pain would kind of be bearable. I think I went to school most days, but would come home and just not really do anything. Um, it was quite heartbreaking also because I wasn't allowed to actually do horseback riding anymore, but I still had my pony. Um, so yeah, there was a period of that and a period of my parents taking me to hospital, to all kinds of specialists, to trying to figure out what is this. Because I got physiotherapy, and so the Western medical system, they will find something. They will, if you keep looking, they will always find some stuff. And then the question is, oh yeah, the spine is a bit crooked, or the spine got some damage from that accident. But is that actually what causes the pain? Is a whole different question, I think, that I know nowadays. But they had all kinds of wild assumptions. So I still don't have the diagnosis. I think I have a pretty solid sense of it myself nowadays. But back then it ranged from anything from, oh, maybe the spine is actually broken somewhere and got fractured, which I thought for quite a while, to maybe it's my appendix. So I think they even called me into hospital to take out my appendix just in case, and then last minute decided to not to do it anyways. So it was also just lots of wild guessing. And my blood tests would just be bad for years at a time, where they could see that the inflammation in my body was just insanely high, but they didn't know why. So they started treating me for a bunch of things, and then at some point they checked if it could be psychologically. So the brain scans and all that, and gently checked in around if I had friends or if I was insane, but I don't think they checked that thoroughly, because I think maybe some of these things also pointed towards trauma or developmental trauma or family circumstances. But I don't think they seriously considered that or could see kind of the link back then. Maybe I probably want to share a little bit my understanding of it nowadays, but I think we will come to that later. So back then, I think I remember this 1.5 years, 2 years was kind of not good. I would go to physiotherapy twice a week for years, which would kind of always stabilize it, but I think she would just get into a status quo that was bearable. And with that also just came a lot of fear in my body, and I would, I think, get tenser and tenser because I was starting to get more and more scared of doing the wrong movements and inflicting more pain, because there would be periods where it would just be significantly worse. And usually, actually, whenever I had vacation, I would start resting more or watching TV or something, which I only did in vacations. Then it would usually get significantly worse, for example. Or when I did movement, so I started to just like my memories is just like walking around, like being really tight in my shoulders and in my breathing, and just like I could do a bit of horseback riding, but if my horse would like do the wrong movement, it would hurt me so much. And then usually I also had such trouble breathing, so I sometimes had to go to the doctor if I just couldn't breathe at the moment anymore. So yeah, it just kind of really made it worse, and I started, I guess, having quite a lot of changes in my brain just from the chronic pain where you kind of start almost like looking for pain, or you're so hypervigilant, and like more and more things start to actually feel like pain also. Um, so a lot of these changes just kind of started happening as I was a teenager, and I remember that as just like suddenly being in that reality when I was 13, 14, 15, and being like, where does all this come from? Before I had like normal teenager problems, and now I'm dealing with this. And I don't know if it will ever go away. Or like in the beginning, I assumed it would. And then at some point I realized, oh, they can't give me a diagnosis. They keep treating me with all kinds of massage, a lot of fascia treatments, a lot of treatments. Also, my parents did really what they could. Some of these treatments were great and maybe helped a tiny bit. But some of these treatments, like the fascia treatments that I got from the healthcare system, they also just made it absolutely worse. And I just remember a lot of unattuned doctors touching my back and me just completely being in freeze and just not liking it. And often ending up in more pain afterwards, actually. So I also just got more and more pain from more and more fear from just getting treatments or from just being touched as well. And I think something drastically changed when the doctors at some point started giving up on finding a diagnosis. And I remember one conversation with a doctor. It must have been end of 14, maybe 15, when he started, telling my parents that, okay, he's actually going to stop looking now because he doesn't know what else to do anymore. And that he thinks the next step is that my parents should prepare for the situation that I will never be able to work in my life. And get an insurance for me that will, like if you're invalid, that's what it's called in German, you're not able to work, so that you have some kind of insurance paying for you for the rest of your life. And yeah, I get quite impacted just sharing that now. I realized the last 1 or 2 years how impactful that actually was, without having realized it back then. But I think I started working actually around with the idea of, oh, I don't seriously need to dream about a profession because I don't think I will be able to work. And yeah, we recently realized how much it actually made my future blank. Like, even though I got better and I could actually work later, I just never really had corrected that until recently, that, wait, I can work and I can have a really awesome, meaningful profession actually and work. There was just this sense of blankness that I think I got from that moment onwards. And a pretty wild thing happened then that I haven't actually talked with many people about. Most of the time I would just have this fear, like, of hurting myself and be really tense just because it hurts so much. And I don't think I really knew how to regulate myself, or there wasn't much safety at home or attunement or touch. So I think I was quite challenged in my nervous system at that time. And then I think school didn't help. And I really didn't care that much about school because I had bigger problems. And I don't remember where I was, but when I was 15, I remember having a moment where I suddenly had this. Oh, I've never talked about this detail. I felt like I descended from the sky. And I remember feeling my body suddenly, but not realizing, and I had no idea what was happening. But I remember thinking, now it's better. now will be significantly healed. Like I will have significantly less pain. I remember thinking, I wonder if this is true. But it was true. And I think the way I make sense of it is like I think I was so dissociated for many years in my body that I actually suddenly had one of these blissful moments that I would have as a kid and suddenly feel my body. And it was true. I could go about my day now and I couldn't go running or something with a lot of like, um, what's it called? Like movement that's very sudden. I couldn't play tennis, but I could go biking and I could go inline skating and I could go swimming and I could slowly start maybe running a bit, but then once in a while I would hurt myself. So I wasn't in constant pain. From then on, I had twice a year where I would suddenly hurt myself and then it was really bad, but then it would get better again. And I could meet friends again after school and I wouldn't be on painkillers anymore. And that was a wild experience because it was really like in the blink of a moment. And I've always had these moments as a kid. I think that's part of the runner high. Like I loved being so exhausted. I would just keep running until I would get into this high, or I would just keep being outside in nature until I would like completely bliss out and have these moments of happiness that would always just make me cry as a child. And I loved them and I cherished them as a child. That was like me time with my dog and my horse. And yeah, in a way, I think I was used to that from a young age. I I was always sad since I was like maybe like 8 or 9 or 10 that these moments never happened in contact with other people. And I spent a lot of time thinking about that as a child, like fantasizing about wanting to spend time with my friends in a way that I would actually be there and have these moments. So I remember trying to arrange that because I had friends and I think I had a good time with them, but I couldn't actually, and especially as a teenager, I couldn't feel myself when I was with them. I could only feel this amount of love when I was away from them. And that's always kind of bothered me. So I wondered if I like just spend long enough time with them. Well, I always fantasized about being in the presence of someone but not having to interact. And I tried arranging that in really weird ways, but yeah, that didn't really work somehow. Or I would always have this thing. Oh yeah, true. I would always have this thing where I would spend time with friends, but I wasn't there. Or would go to school, but I wasn't actually there. I remember going to school and I remember coming home. And then I would suddenly feel myself again. And I was like, why can I not feel myself when I'm in school? And I remember I was really upset about it for years. And why can I not actually feel myself when I'm with my friends? Um, and I just couldn't figure it out. It was as if like there was complete autopilot, and like 6 hours later, I would suddenly come back to myself. And it was stronger when I was really sick. That's the same age, and then it came better. So I think I'm already like pointing towards it, like the sickness also as a way of, I think, chronic dissociation, potentially. Just not having felt safe enough in contact with other people. Um, that would get a little bit better and a little bit better with some friends, but it would never be these states of bliss or love that I would just constantly get into actually when I was on my own or with animals. Um, yeah, sometime, yeah, 15. What happens then? High school. I didn't like my school, but I liked how ambitious it was. Ambitious it was always. I liked having to learn difficult math. Oh, I think I started compensating now at that age very strongly and consciously. Um, which is quite a theme, which I didn't really realize because it kind of just, I thought that was just what it's like for everyone. But because I had this sickness, and probably because of other things as well, I just started learning that a lot of things are actually quite uncomfortable for me. So I couldn't actually concentrate when I was in school because I had a hard time concentrating when I was around anyone, unless I'm on my own or unless I'm like multitasking. I showed, I guess, a bit of these ADHD-like symptoms. I didn't have ADHD. Don't think I have. But I had some of these concentration problems and having to find really silent environments or learning that a lot of the things teachers wanted me to do, I didn't want to do. I had a hard time learning things by heart, and that was really what was expected. So I remember just kind of getting through. Like in math, that was the easiest way, I think, to kind of show what happened was I would get a good enough grade, and I would just use my logic to get through. But the teacher would always look at it and be like, that's not what we taught you. That's not how you're supposed to do this. You're still going to get a good grade, or you're still correct. Somehow you got to the right result, and I can see why. But you're like making it really complicated and just like using your logic brain to just get all around it instead of just doing this thing I had to learn by heart. And it's because I could never remember any of these formulas because I couldn't concentrate in school. And this is kind of how it went. Like the same with my Latin teacher. He was like really upset with me for many years because I would never know what any, like I never actually learned the words and what they mean, but I was just really excellent at the grammar and could solve it. But I remember sometimes he had to go to the high school board to have my tests checked because my tests on the vocabulary were so bad, but my actual exams were really good. And because the discrepancy was so high, he always had to have them extra checked, which you have to do if there's like several grades in between repeatedly. So things like that would just often happen, where I didn't spend any time on schoolwork either. So I had bad grades when it came to things where I had to learn them by heart, which you have to do a lot in German schools. And I didn't see any meaning in that either. I wasn't interested. There's another thing I was thinking of. I guess I also just learned at some point that my logical and spatial thinking is just not good. So I just always focused on language, and I was just really intuitively good at that. I remember trying to do math homework with my dad and my brother, who are both like math geniuses, and just it not making sense to me, or like logical thinking just kind of, I could do it and I was good at it, but it would just make me really, really tired. And I think that was a bit the disconnection I had with my dad sometimes because he's really into engineering and math and talks a lot about engines and building houses and really wanted to teach me that, but just not really being interested in the same thing. So having trouble following it. And then I always would make an effort because trying to connect with him over that. But also feeling a bit out of place because my brother and my father were just so good at it that they would talk at a pace I could never really keep up. Which felt quite sad as a child, I think. Yeah, so I think I started compensating really strongly, which I only realized maybe like 5 years ago. I didn't realize at that age. I think it's gonna show up later, my story. School was alright. I think I had friends. I had some fun. But it did really bother me that I couldn't be present. I couldn't focus. Oh, I also had this thing where I think it was really impacted by the food at home. In the beginning, when I was young, my mom would like cook and everything. And that was a good experience. But at some point, she stopped doing that a little bit. My father was working a lot. My mother was working a lot. And somehow, my parents allowed me to make decisions as a child that were maybe sometimes not the best. So for some reason, I had decided that I didn't want to eat in school. I think because I was like, why? I don't know. Why would I eat in school? I was like 9 or something when I decided that. So that meant that I was just going home, but there was no one there for like another 5 hours or something before my mom would come home from work. So I just kind of ate, but I think we didn't really go shopping in a way that would prepare for that to actually be healthy food in the fridge that I could prepare. And I didn't really know how to prepare food. So I just remember feeling, oh, there's food, but there's nothing I actually want to eat. And feeling quite impacted by that actually. Um, and just having been uncomfortable around food, which I think will show up later when I speak about my current life as well. So there was both that and I think another thing that I'm thinking of now, because I start speaking about the dissociation, is when I was a child, I remember being in rooms with adults mostly with adults. And I remember thinking, this is too intense. Like, what the hell is going on? Because I would sense things. And then I was like, that's like, I think I must have been pretty young when I was like, that's too sexual. That's not allowed. That's what the hell are you sensing here? That's forbidden. And I would start, I imagine I would start dissociating there just because I was like, don't show the amount of joy you experience and don't. It just feel, yeah, as a child, I thought it was way too sexual. And I would often be socially a bit awkward because I was like, why are people small talking when like these wild things are in the room? Why is nobody addressing them? Um, so that was when I was really young. And then for a long time, I couldn't be present with people. And then I think when I was 17, I was kind of smooth. Like parents would also, no, teachers, parents would usually love me. I was very responsible. I guess I had to be. But I was also, I think, starting to feel socially anxious and a certain social anxiety, um, which actually got stronger when I got a bit older. And I think part of that is I just didn't get social settings. I'm like, these wild things are still happening and nobody's talking about them. And I was like, there's weird social dynamics here. These people are attracted to each other and I'm feeling all that shame and I'm feeling all that weird attraction to that person and this. And I was also constantly confused about why I was constantly attracted to women and my friends. Like with men, I was just like, yeah, that's how it is. But I would constantly be attracted to my friends or women and I would be like, that doesn't mean I want to sleep with them. What does all this mean? Um, I guess I did also come to terms with being bisexual. Like there is a certain attraction to women, um, but just sometimes being overwhelmed just by feeling it, almost like with everyone, constantly, and not knowing what to do or how that is socially acceptable or what that would even mean. So a lot of these things I just walked around with for a while, for a couple of years. Um, when I'm 17, I have another one of these moments where I descended again, like literally the same experience. This time I remember where I was. I was at a lake close to my house. And I remember again having this moment like, oh, cool. Now I'm significantly more healed again. And it was true again. Like I felt my body more. I think this is the moment where I could start feeling my feet. And symptoms were significantly improved. I speak about like I wasn't woo as a child. These things just kind of kept happening, and I was like, I just knew it was true, and it was true. It showed to be true. So I don't think as a child I tried to make sense of what that was or why. Or it just felt so real. It's a bit funny speaking about it though. Um, so my symptoms improved significantly again when I was 17 then. And I still couldn't really do sports because that a wrong movement would fuck me up. And I would sometimes still get these periods of once or twice a year. Like if I slept too much, like moved too little for a while or did the wrong movement. Something weird happened where I'm coming towards the end of my high school phase now. Um, my parents were unreligious, and I grew up in northern Germany, which is not very religious. I think I could count the people who were Christian on a hand. I think there were more Muslims around than Christian people, even was my impression. I've gotten some religious teachings, like in primary school. I think I had a year of that in high school, maybe. But it was quite pluralistic, so we learned about all kinds of religions, and it wasn't very deep. I had gotten my confirmation, and I got baptized a week before that. But that was just kind of a thing everyone did. So I was really not religious. And I had really focused on philosophy instead of religion in high school. But for some reason, there was something. I think I had this gut feeling that there was something more in life. Maybe also because I had kept having these blissful moments and these strong love experiences and experiences of union. So I wanted to know, and I guess religion and Christianity was the most obvious thing from the cultural background that I came from. So I thought that the moment I finish high school, I'm gonna move to Colombia and live in a Christian mission for a year. And I don't really know where I got that idea from. But yeah, I decided to do that. So I finished high school. I think I just turned 19. I was really goddamn happy to never have to go back to that. I think back then was also my sense of, cool, from now on, I'm just gonna have more freedom. I will never have to do this amount of things I don't actually want to have to do. And I guess I also just had a bunch more of these blissful states because I got into the raver scene when I was 16, 17. I started going to these open airs in Hamburg. There was a really big techno scene. Started hanging out with people who were significantly older than me, and did an internship when I was 17 in a techno club, where I then started working, helping out a little bit, which was awesome because I started dancing all night or in the sun and on open air to techno music, and I started loving it and just having these really blissful experiences more and more. And I think I learned that this was a way of having those moments while the people were around me. And that just had a really big impression. And that was kind of similar to these runner highs I would get, where I would just run until this high would come. So yeah, I loved that. And I loved that I was actually working in a techno club, which I think because I was hanging out with older people, I saw that some of these people started getting into substances and drugs. And some of these people got into not so good drugs and kind of didn't return. But because I was working in this techno club and I was only 18, those were all the old raver people. They actually gave me like a proper introduction to what each substance is, because I would see the substances around, and they would kind of really strongly encourage me to start liking the music when I'm sober. And they would kind of watch out, and I would just be sober, also because I was significantly younger than anyone else. So that just made me a raver that was actually sober. I loved the music and I loved dancing and just had a lot of these blissful moments. Finished high school, was really, really happy, but just I was really happy that I did that. I had some good years, good memories as well, and I was happy to be out of there. So a couple of weeks after high school, I moved to Colombia Um, my parents are pretty relaxed. I just remember like my parents didn't try to figure out my future with me. I guess I just had to be responsible. Um, those, which sometimes I think it was too much a responsibility, but it was also I would just be really like figuring things out on my own. Just kind of present my father one day with, oh yeah, by the way, I'm moving to Colombia in a couple of months, and it's all figured out. So I got into this program where the German state would pay for you, but you're supposed to get a bit of donations back, or as much as possible. So I would write these newspaper articles about my time in Colombia. And yeah, I moved to Colombia to volunteer with kids in this church program where it was kids who either didn't have parents or they had parents that couldn't take care of them. So they would live with us. And I would teach them, I would do homework with them, I would be in the kitchen, I would literally do all kinds of jobs there. And I remember it was a strong experience of being in a very different cultural context and really realizing that a lot of what I had taken for granted was just not applying here. And people had significantly less money. And I think the money that was supposed to be for me and the other German guy was actually was supposed to be for our food. I think we were actually feeding everyone with that money. And yeah, strong gratitude for what I had. Really seeing that not everyone has that, but also seeing that a lot of the cultural norms were different. And suddenly there was actually people would socialize a lot more and actually hang out with each other and go to church together. And I was also just really touched by the sense of togetherness and belonging there. It was also quite uncomfortable because I was suddenly living in a Christian mission and people were telling me what to do all day. And people were telling me all kinds of unreasonable things that just didn't make sense to me. Like what music I was allowed to listen to, who I was allowed to hang out with. I wouldn't stick to those rules. I would sneak out and hang out with other friends. And I had some good experiences of being with God and going to church. And for some months I was like, yes, this is it. I found it. And then I realized that this wasn't it. It just didn't make sense to me the way they understood religion there, which is a lot more rules based, not very mystical. And again, I wouldn't have any of my mystical experiences in church, well, some of them, not because of what they preached. So then I knew I wanted to come back. I guess I also knew I wanted to come back when I saw how poor the healthcare system was on the countryside where I was living. I was living in the mountains, like 4,000 meters height, and went to hospital with a kid who had broken her arm, or my partner at the time had broken his shoulder when we were on vacation. And I just saw how long it took them to take care of it. And they would do open surgery with several people in the room, and we would be sitting there as well. And I think I realized that a lot of people would die from harmless traffic accidents. And yeah, it's sad. It's really sad. And I guess I realized I could go back to Europe at that time. So I moved back, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I think I knew I wanted to go to uni at some point, but I couldn't even vaguely start thinking about what I actually wanted to do with my life. Because my first partner was half Danish as well, we just both thought it would be fun to move to Denmark and learn the language. I broke up with him and moved there on my own then without him. And again, I just called my dad one day while I was still in Colombia. I was like, I'm gonna come home and I'm gonna move to Denmark. Can you move all my stuff with me to, I don't know, your mom's place? So his parents were Danish. And he had spent most of my childhood in Germany and started kind of living there half time when I was a teenager. And I think he moved there full time after I moved out from Germany. So I was like, yeah, maybe I can just move close to him and see what it's like, move in at my grandmother's place. So this was the second time where I moved to a new country where this time I didn't speak the language at all. The first time in Colombia, I did speak Spanish, obviously not that good, but I did speak it. And now he dropped me, I think it was like at 10 o'clock at night with all my stuff at my grandmother's place. And I knew my grandmother, but also I've never spoken the same language as her. And she didn't speak German, she didn't speak English. And I think that was brilliant because that actually made me just catch up on my Danish really quickly. In Denmark, this weird thing happened where people would come to her house and she would just pretend I was Danish. She would be like, that's my oldest son's daughter. Of course she's Danish. And people would be like, but she doesn't speak Danish. Where is she from? What's the story here? And then my grandmother would just be like, yeah, she grew up in Germany, but she's Danish. And I guess I also got my Danish passport. Like I had a bit of visa issues and stuff. Like then we made a lot of mistakes, but at some point they realized that I actually have Danish citizenship. I'm just gonna move a bit out of the sun. And I remember that when people pretended that I was Danish, I felt really welcome. And I remember that my shoulders dropped. And I realized in that moment that I guess I was Danish, in the sense that my father had always done lots of weird things that I thought was just really, really weird until I realized, oh, that actually seems to be Danish culture. Just like little things, the way they would eat or celebrate Christmas. He had just never introduced it as a Danish thing to me. But I actually realized that I actually am a bit familiar with the culture more than I thought. And the second thing I realized was that it was just easier being Danish than being German. When I was in high school and we would go on school trips, our teachers would tell us to literally apologize if we meet people from a different country. Or try to not mention you're German. And that was kind of the thing to do. I think this is also what they taught in the 90s in Germany. And it was also often tense in Germany. It was my experience. Like things were really political, and even just talking about something, politics would immediately enter the room. And how do you address, how do you gender your language even? And whether you gendered your language or not would usually become a theme. And I just experienced a lot of these things as quite tense, or I didn't know what to think, or I could kind of get both perspectives. So I just noticed that when I arrived in Denmark, I was so much more relaxed. I see things to be slower, significantly less political, less tense, more trusting. And yeah, those things are all qualities of Scandinavian Danish culture. And those just, they weren't involved in Second World War as much, nearly, or First World War, as Germany was. And I think that just kind of gave me an insight and actually a break to learn to regulate my nervous system for some years. Because things would be less tense, people were slower in general, less aggressive. And that was just this really big exhale over a couple of years where I could feel myself more. And, I started studying in Denmark after living there for 1 year. And I just kind of found this university that I thought was really cool and realized that it was not the German school system anymore. So I wasn't asked to learn anything by heart anymore, which you have to do in German universities a lot. They cannot just test your knowledge rather than your intelligence or understanding. And here I was at this university on the countryside and beautiful nature surroundings. I took an undergraduate in an international program, so I studied in English. And the program was research-based, which suited me so well. So I didn't actually have to sit in classes. I had like 7 hours of classes every week, which is ridiculously little. Also, you don't have to show up. Nobody tests attendance. And 50% would be exams where I would have to apply things. I'm even allowed to use the internet. I'm allowed to Google stuff, but I have to just show that I actually can apply things, which was very different than the German system. And then 50% would be that I have to write a thesis every semester. So instead of just writing my bachelor thesis, I would have actually do research every semester. And that also just suited me so well. So there was a lot of self-responsibility and application and research, which I loved. I really loved that. I had such a good experience at the university. There was also such an interdisciplinary approach that I didn't have to just narrow in on something. So I studied international social science, just quite broadly, philosophy, politics, economics. And it was a postmodern university. That's where the time it came out of. And so we studied a lot of Marx. We studied a lot of well, most universities, I think, studied economics as understanding how economics work, or like within the economic system that we have. This university would just always take a step back and look at the economical system that we have and then compare it to others that could alternatively exist. So it was very skeptical of the status quo of capitalism, which I thought was really cool. And I loved having that understanding and that approach. So that was a really good experience. I never had to pressure myself to study. I was really into it. And I was studying with people from all over the world, which was also really cool. Back then, I thought that I wanted to work with international development work. So like UNICEF or the European Union, the UN, something like that. And this bachelor degree would kind of be the preparation for that. This was the first time in my life where I came really close to a burnout. I was doing a lot of things at once because I noticed, I can actually do that. So just because I could, I started studying and I got really, really good grades. Got some of the best grades at university. At the same time, I was going to evening school to get my high school degree in Danish. At the same time, I think I was taking my motorbike license, and I was the manager of 2 international development projects where we would travel to the other side of the world and with funding from the Danish state and do like democracy work and development work. And that was scary, just getting close to burnout, just the amount of stress I would have. And I would, again, not being able to feel myself. And it almost happened a second time. And that's, I think, really when I realized, okay, I need to really change something and slow down. There was this 1 week when I was 22 then, where I've been talking forever. can probably go on. Um, that's the week that changed my life the most within 1 week. That's usually the title I have. I think it's still accurate. What happened in that week? In that week, I had philosophy intensive courses from Monday to Friday, I think. Were just several hours of philosophy of knowledge, which I loved. I was so into it. So that just, yeah, looking at epistemology and ontology, which was like a whole trip in itself. So this is the moment where suddenly started having these blissful experiences with people around me. And then on the Wednesday of that week, my friends and me, most of them were older, more experienced. We started doing psychedelics. They have done that many times before, and I think at that time I only had taken some MGMA a few times. And we would take quite a lot of mushrooms. And because nothing immediately happened, we also took some LSD, which is literally, like, don't do that for your first trip. So I was on like 2 grams of mushrooms and a whole tab of LSD for my first trip. And that was wild. It felt like falling in love completely with LSD. I think I still introduce it like that. Like, wow, this is actually, my first love of my life. I'm just completely taken, and it's the best thing in the world, and I just want to keep doing it. Even though the second half of the trip was just fierce sweating and physical pain, and it was probably quite a bad trip. Like, I didn't even believe that my friends were real anymore. I went home and just started ignoring them, because I couldn't tell what was real anymore at all. But also, it was the best thing ever. So, that was wild. That completely blew my mind. And I fit it to the philosophy piece. That also blew my mind. And then the third thing that happened in a week was that I had seen a weird Facebook description for a workshop that I read. And I remember thinking, I don't understand this. I signed up and I showed up for the workshop. I remember telling my friends the day before, I'm going to this workshop all weekend, paid a bunch of money, and I don't know what it's about. So I showed up in Copenhagen at a beautiful house Saturday morning for a circling and surrender leadership workshop. And I just remember going in and meeting the people and feeling at home. It's because those people were also into contact improv, which I liked at the time. They seemed like cool people. There was nice electronic music. I liked it. And then weird things kept happening. Like, the workshop starts and nobody says who they are. I remember it was a weird, absurd situation where some people tried having a name around, but it took us all day because some people felt tense. And so I was completely chaotic and I had no idea what we were doing. We just kept sitting in a big group. But I also remember it as, I'm intrigued because I can't figure out what we're doing, but I could never figure out what I was doing in life. So this feels weirdly similar to that. I also kept being intrigued because I saw just so much beauty around me, and I was allowed to just observe people, and it felt like we could just repeatedly blow our minds, or like blow the context, or like, what is this actually? Like, it just kept getting bigger and bigger, as in like, oh, this just seems to be life. Actually, this isn't actually a workshop. This is just life. And that kept really intriguing me. And I remember being circled during that work weekend by someone. And I remember feeling myself in the presence of another person for the first time in my life. I remember thinking, this is what I've been chasing all the time. Um, yeah, it's quite touching to say actually. Um, I could feel my body, and I wasn't just constantly trying to make up what to say in the next moment. I think I realized I didn't have to say anything. Yeah, I want to share some things that kind of run up to this event. I think I didn't speak into. So I remember as a child always wanting more contact with people and not getting that. And then at some point I started believing that, oh, I think that is maybe what sex is. The thing I thought would be possible in contact. And then I remember when I had sex the first time in my life, I was heartbroken because I realized, oh no, I had sex, but that wasn't it either. I thought people would like finally feel each other, and I thought I would finally feel myself in contact with other people, but that just didn't happen. And that's where this religious search came from. So Christianity wasn't it either. At some point before this week, this week that changed my life, I went to the Middle East for months because I wanted to keep looking. Because Christianity wasn't it, but maybe Judaism or like any of the other Abrahamic religions seems like the next step. That wasn't it either. But I met this guy in Israel who I told him about that I had this gut feeling that there's something more. And I guess he encouraged me to keep looking. And then I had an MDMA trip where I did MDMA for the first time, where everything was love and light, which was cool. But I kept having a sense of darkness at the edge of my trip. I was like, I can't go there on MDMA, but I keep getting a sense of like a fear or something is really dark. And that intrigued me, and I was like, it's right there, but I can't go there right now. So I kept looking, and that's when I signed up for this workshop. And that's when I wanted to try out mushrooms and LSD and all that. And that's when I started touching it. And then at the circling, really, holy shit, like I've never been able to meditate, like even for 2 minutes. Like I was so in my brain. Suddenly I would be present for the first time in my life. Or I guess for the first time in my life in contact with others. Because this is what just being in nature with animals has always felt like. So that was wildly life-changing. I kept being interested in philosophy. I kept doing a lot of psychedelics for some years, which used to be my favorite thing at the time, even though I used to have bad trips often. And I kept going back to circling every month for a whole weekend. And slowly that really changed me and changed my life. And I would befriend a lot more circling people. And this circling was led by someone who's now one of my absolute closest friends and collaborators for many years. That also led, all three of these things led to me being disillusioned with international development, and also my trips to some refugee camps in the deserts where I would go and hold workshops. All that would lead to me not actually wanting to work in this field anymore, not believing in it because of post-colonialism, because I didn't actually see it work, because I kept not feeling any agency whenever we talked about global institutions. It's like, how do I actually achieve change? How do I know I achieved change? How can we even talk to each other and regulate our nervous system? I just keep talking to this anonymous institution that has no face, no nervous system. So like something here just doesn't work. And I think that's when I realized I didn't want to work in an institution. I didn't want to do global work. I didn't want to do systemic work anymore. I want to do relational, personal work that I can feel in my body in the same room. So I started becoming really interested in conflict mediation. Did a lot of restorative justice education and trainings. I had already done a bunch of trainings before. I had already done a bunch of research on international law and international conflicts. So this felt like the next step in a way. And I just left my political engagement completely behind, which I used to be in parties and do political work before. And I remember having a real crisis when I finished my university degree, because I couldn't see how what I learned in contact improv, in circling, in my own awareness practice, I couldn't see how they would actually fit together with all the knowledge and academic training I've had. So I think this was when I got a little bit depressed. That's just the only time in my life when I got depressed. I don't think it was a full-blown depression, but like waking up and not wanting to wake up and not feeling any joy. So it felt scary, suddenly not feeling anything anymore. It was also the middle of the COVID pandemic, so there was no way of meeting new people. All that had also really impacted me. And then one day, I hang out with friends. This guy who I've been around, he just looks at me, listens to me, and just tells me to go read about integral philosophy, and particularly Kegan. And I go home and I read about it, and it hit, and it really changed my life. He's still a close friend. I'm just really grateful, and there's a lot of these moments where I've been surrounded by really smart people who usually were like, most of my friends are 15, 20 years older than me. And it really shows in my life and my own experience that I've been surrounded by very loving, very wise, incredibly intelligent, heartfelt people. And reading about integral theory really dissolved that whole meaning crisis that I had. So I fell a little bit in love with Ken Wilber's work and all that, and just consumed everything about integral theory for a while. I was lucky to end up seeing that Denmark is one of the few places in the world where you can study integral psychotherapy and get a proper therapist license. So somewhere in this disillusionment with systemic work, I had wanted to look into more personal relational work and how to do that my profession. I wonder how to move out of the sun. Yeah. So I started studying psychotherapy now, which is not full-time. I kept doing lots of circling. And I think I was 25 when I started. I was as young as I was allowed to be in Denmark for this study. And I think I started studying it for 3 different reasons. My sense was that there were some difficulties I had in my relationships that I wanted to figure out. So my sense was that I would never be able to be a good wife or mother if I didn't actually go really deep in figuring out some of my stuff. And then my second reason was that I had a slight fear of going insane since I was young. I think since I was a kid or even teenager, one of these two, there was a slight sense of like not being able to really trust myself in what's actually real. And that got stronger when I did psychedelics. I was like, even during a good trip, I would be like, I think I could go insane accidentally or something, which I never did. I was usually really quite grounded, but there was always this slight feel I couldn't shake. So I was like, maybe if I become a therapist and take a whole professional education on that, I don't care too much if I actually want to work as one, but I think I will be able to tell more what is sane and what is insane when I do this. And then I think the third reason was that at that time I had started to already train in circling as a circling leader with Circling Europe. That's what they were called at that time. And I wanted to work with this. And I was already part of a company with a bunch of friends where we would have like several hundred square meters of workshop rooms and just lead workshops several times a week and have a whole business for this and consultancy. And my sense was that circling had given me incredibly good skills, but that there were a couple of skills that I wanted to have from therapy. And one of them, not just my own insanity, but I wanted to be able to tell whether other people are insane or not. So those were my reasons. And then I started this 4-year-long training that I finished this year, officially graduated, defended my thesis, got my license and everything. And a couple of months before that training ended, I was like, cool, I know my own insanity, I know my sanity now. I'm not too worried about just turning insane randomly. I think I could make a good wife. I think I can make a good mother now. My relationships are pretty awesome. Have a lot of very fulfilling relationships with my friends, which wasn't possible in the beginning, and a thriving business with clients. So it feels weirdly cool that all these 3 things actually came quite solid in the training. I do find it interesting also that having done that extensive training, I've trained for 4 years as a psychotherapist, and I've done 4 years of training as a circling leader. I've been circling for 8 years, but I've been training for now 5 years, but it was kind of the same time. And that the insights I would have from circling trainings were significantly bigger and more impactful than from a psychotherapy training. And that just kept happening. The same with therapy. Like the circling coaching I received was significantly more impactful by far than any of the therapy. The therapy just always felt like grounding things, like making integrate things, ground things. Whereas the circling just felt like really moving things through, showing me new ways, really training my awareness. A lot of like mind-blowing moments and really awakening moments to my life force, things like that. And I think both together was really awesome for me, and I needed that. So I really realized throughout those trainings as well how dissociated I was before, how I probably had a bunch of developmental trauma. I also see a lot of physical trauma. So just coming back to the sickness, I think my more like wholesome view on it is that just the emotional environment I was in wasn't supportive enough at that time. Psychologically, I needed more support as well. And that I had some physical things in my body or aspects that just made it more challenging, and that kind of created more unsafety. I realized that I'm hypermobile quite severely, which suddenly, when that got treated last year, like I realized only last year, got special treatment for that, and just one single treatment actually resolved my chronic pain that I've had since I've been 4. That was mind-blowing, and just a couple of counterintuitive things that I just didn't know, but because I suddenly had the right practitioner in my life, or teacher, that changed everything. Like the fact that I I spent several hours a day stretching and doing yoga because I thought that would be good. And just being told to not do that because I'm hypermobile, that just resolved most of the pain, actually. So again, like, I've had wise friends around me. I've also had incredible teachers at a quite young age. Like, I was 22 when I got into circling, or 21. I started training as a circling leader when I was 24. There were incredible teachers around and incredible body practitioners that really significantly moved things for me. So I think I've been lucky in just having had a strong sense of community since I was 21. The circling community, the Scandinavian Burning Man, the Borderland community has been really significant as well. So I've actually had this holding around me, just with people who have had significantly more experience and age, and could kind of guide me, and I would guide others and more and more. So that's been, I think, the biggest blessing in my life, actually, that resource. It's been really possible to change and move things, and again, just see that, oh, I can actually just, anything I think is granted, or I have to take it for granted, in reality, I don't have to do that. I think this is where I got really into magic as well. Of like, oh, you can actually completely change the fundamentals of reality. Like, you don't just change your content up here, but just the way you relate to the present moment. For example, if you change something there and tweak it, or most of the times, if you relax something there, it will just completely change reality more than I've ever thought was possible. And that was also really strong learning from the Borderland community, which is a community I hadn't been that involved with the last 1.5 years, but was heavily involved with as one of the leaders for 5-6 years. It's somewhere between Denmark and Sweden, mostly located. And that was a place completely blew my mind as well. I think I started going when I was 22, and then every year for a while. And just seeing that you can build a whole reality where you don't use your phone, you don't use any money, you don't need a key for anything, you just feel safe for a whole week somewhere with like 3,000, 4,000 other people. And you can literally do whatever you want in a way, or like, you don't have to accept normal reality. You can actually completely change it and turn reality upside down. There's a strong influence from LARPing, live action role play, which is like you could just be somewhere else, or like do something weird, or like be yourself for a week for change. And that community has also been very impactful. Also, the way that people would show up for each other and the amount of resources, and suddenly realizing, oh, the community would suddenly buy 100 hectares of land in Sweden with 300 hectares of forest around. So suddenly you would have like these 400 hectares of serene nature in Sweden. It was completely unreal to me, and you would just play and do weird things, and nothing has to make sense. But also people just helping each other so much. That's been really, really touching. And I think this is also what my time in Scandinavia has shown me. I ended up living in Denmark for 6 years, and then in Sweden for 3 years. I think these are the countries with some of the most trust in the world among each other. And that's been incredible to experience. You can just leave your stuff, and you can kind of be sure that people don't generally steal. And whenever I interact with the state, I know the state has like kind of my best intentions. And if I go to an institution, it's going to be really effective, but also people are going to really make an effort to help me. And that some of the political decisions that have been made in the past have led to a welfare state that is incredibly touching. Like, in Germany, I would have had to pay for university, and my parents would have to pay for me. I ended up studying in Denmark and got everything paid, plus got more money than I needed when I was studying. And it's been incredibly touching, actually. So these experiences were quite influential on me as well, and on my nervous system, I think. And just having actually, I think, achieved a lot more capacity in my nervous system from just, I used to be really dissociated to, oh, I've just received so much safety and trust, and relaxation that it feels like I'm a different person. And I think this is often a sense of God is, I don't even quite know what's the same thing anymore, because everything in my body feels different, like every cell, because of what's actually possible to change through diet and relationships and love and safety. And yeah, where am I now? I recently moved out of Sweden because there was a sense of, I'm done here for now. I think I need the freedom to move a little bit, to travel, to think this is probably the most free I'm going to be in my life. Having graduated and being even more committed to taking care of my health, which at this stage also just means really acknowledging that conventional society isn't quite healthy, I think. Or realizing that in a supermarket, I pass 99% of the products because they're not actually good, and being more in the countryside and all these things. And then also just having gone really deep into circling practices and sauna leadership and work like that, like embodiment and relational practices, and spending most of my time leading those, and having gotten used to a life where what I do with my friends is that we lead these events for people where we regularly just touch the depth of what matters most in life. And we just, like, I care about people experiencing love and themselves and what they actually want in life and their own leadership, their agency. I care about people experiencing in those practices that the way they are is actually okay. They don't actually need to change. Or yeah, maybe I stop here. I probably missed a bunch. I've been talking forever. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
It's so generous of you to share so fully of your life and to answer the question with such heart and care. I feel really touched that you would share so fully. I have many questions. I'd like to take a brief intermission for a few minutes and take care of some things here. Maybe meet back in about 5 minutes or so. Would that be all right for you?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Thank you for that, friend. Um, hmm. I guess I want to go back first to you spoke in a couple places about this, but how do you understand now what the pain and illness that you had was at the time that the doctors couldn't diagnose?
Um, I think that my healing capacity was not great at the time because of the challenges in my physical surroundings or emotional surroundings with my family, and that I've had physically challenging experiences in my upbringing, and some of these were severely exaggerated by the hypermobility. So there's actually this particular food that isn't really good for me, and there can easily be a lot of unsafety in touch. I think maybe because of lack of emotional attunement, but also because I could easily misplace my shoulders and my knees, or if somebody, I still have it, like I love dancing with people and stuff, but if I don't actually feel safe with that, I won't dislocate myself in contact with someone. It can just feel quite unsafe physically. I think the dissociation has probably been a big part of it as well. And just being one of the more sensitive people in my physical health, I think, sometimes comes with the bliss of all these blissful mystical states, but also more challenging health issues.
And what was the treatment that you received that helped so much in the end?
Um, I guess there was one particular physical treatment that I'm thinking of, and I think I've just done all the clearing up work, because that practitioner has also been completely amazed by how fast, like he's never seen anyone respond that fast to it. So I think all the emotional regulative work that I've been doing really helps as well. I've done trauma therapy, MDR. But what he would do is, it was a combination of telling me not to stretch, which is really healthy for most people to stretch, except if you're hypermobile. You need to learn to like compress your body and not be more loose. So it was a combination of telling me not to stretch, doing something called DNS, dynamic muscular stabilization, which is basically that you learn to use your core in the way that it's supposed to be. So you basically do very subtle breathing exercises as if you're like a toddler in like toddler position. And then if you do several months of them, you will go to the next, and it's like very subtle. So it's basically him just putting a hand on my stomach and telling me when am I breathing correctly, where I'm actually starting to stabilize my core and learning to move from there. And he did fascia treatment in a way that I think a lot of the fascia treatment, I'm not a body therapist myself, but that kind of loosens one spot, but then everything else is still tense. So then you might actually get like even more severe pain, because your system, like if you just treat your foot, but everything else is crooked. And I think that's what used to be so painful as a teenager. And he just saw the intercorrelation between different spots. So he just treated me holistically. So I was more loose after the treatment. And then because I had done some years of Tai Chi, I had done my emotional practices, my meditation, I slowly learned to actually sustain that new relaxation better, I think. That's one response.
And what do you think it was about the environment that circling and people who had done circling created that made it possible for you to be present in your body and not disassociated with other people in the ways that you'd so often experienced yourself in the past?
Slowness and presence, I think, is a big part of it. It's that it was coming from presence, which actually there's incredible capacities in presence. So if you actually drop into presence, there's a lot of healing capacity inherent in us that we can access. Where it's almost like we don't actually need to change something, because our intuitive intelligence in our body, in our system, in us would just kind of take care of it itself. So just having spent a lot of hours in presence, which I always find interesting, like meditation, like I used to struggle to sit down for an hour, or there might be a little bit of effort. Whereas in circling, you easily just sit down for a whole weekend, 30 hours of circling without having to pressure yourself. So relational practices just meant that I spent many, many hours in presence. And then I also think there is something to the high focus on agency and self responsibility and self leadership. Because in circling, you might also discover a lot of conflict or tensions as well, or unsafety. And I wouldn't be the object to it. It wouldn't be like, oh, somebody's doing this to me, which is what it felt like as a child. Um, but it's more that I could suddenly be even in my dissociation and then discover my self leadership there, which might be that, oh, actually, this is too much. Like, I need something else. And I would be really challenged, particularly by one teacher, if I didn't follow my self leadership. For a while, I tried changing the circle. It's like, hey, guys, I feel unsafe. Can you please be different? I would find more and more elegant ways of expressing that. But I was used to people dropping everything every time I felt unsafe, which I think is still what some scenes or modalities have. It's like, oh, somebody's dissociated. Let's make sure they're being regulated. And here I wouldn't experience that. And I would be really challenged by it the first 3 years because I would have to lead myself through it, which either means, okay, what is it that I actually need to feel safe? And I could ask something from the group. Maybe that's what I need. But I also need to be able to make sure that I am safe myself. I can't actually be that reliant on other people all the time. And then with time, what I also discovered is that I think this is usually the next step for people in my self leadership, in my agency. I would maybe also realize that, oh, I feel dissociated here, but that doesn't actually seem to be a problem. Or that actually I can actually allow myself to feel that level of dissociation or freeze or fight or flight, whatever it is. Oh, and really get in touch with the beauty and the intelligence in that. And it actually starts regulating itself. I don't actually have to do anything. Oh, I can actually really feel what it is giving me, or like the need is fulfilling. And then it would just really start unfolding more and more.
You know, the first time that you went to that circling workshop, you had no idea what was happening and it was chaotic and it sounds like a surrendered leadership weekend and you're just like, what is this? I wonder if you could go back in time and speak to yourself as you came into that workshop, what you would explain to yourself about what circling was and how to show up that weekend.
I wouldn't actually.
Mm.
That was perfect. Um, I was intrigued enough that I would come back, and I was completely hooked, and I loved it. And I don't think I actually needed more guidance. Like, I seem to have been fine. I was also just really confronted with nobody actually knows exactly what's going on, and nobody knows in life really what's going on. And back then, I was still a bit scared by that fact. That seems to actually be what life is. Like, nobody of us actually knows exactly what we're doing. Or I think it's good to also be aware that we think we know, but we don't really. Well, that a lot of us kind of pretend we know what we're doing, but it actually just feels a little bit like people dress up in a suit and then pretend they know what they're doing. Whereas I think the unknown, it's good to be awake enough to realize what we don't actually know, I think.
Well, that makes sense that you didn't need that and that it was okay and you wouldn't go back and change it. And I wonder if you were to tell someone else what circling is, how you would explain it to someone else.
I find the phrasing of relational meditation helpful? It's because a lot of people are used to meditation and imagining meditating and bringing that level of awareness to what it's like to be yourself while you're in contact with others. I think it also points to, there are like 1,000 different meditations and they point to different realms and dimensions of reality. That seems to be true for circling as well. And then surrounded leadership seems to be a bit of a different form where I like the phrasing of surrendered leadership as just pointing towards the surrender and the leadership part. Like, there's the invitation is to surrender to what it's actually like in the moment. All of us and what it's like to be together here. And at the same time, point towards leading ourselves through that. So invitation is for everyone to show up in their self-leadership and that I as a leader show up in my leadership.
And I wonder, having heard yourself describe your life story in this conversation, how you might summarize what you've learned or how you've grown over the time so far of your life. It seems to me like you've learned a tremendous amount and grown a tremendous amount. And are you, how old are you now?
I'm 29.
29, I thought so. It's just like that's such a full life. And like you've already lived such a full life and grown so much. And that's also hopefully still early days in your life. Hopefully we have you on this earth for a long time. Um, but I wonder how you would summarize what you've learned so far and how you've grown.
It's a wild question. I think there are a couple of themes on there that I see. Acknowledgement about how much you can actually change is really close to my heart. Like not taking things for granted. Like, yeah, I really like magic for that reason. Like it's incredible how much reality can change when we really dare to show up with our agency. And that also includes really looking at how we are creating the reality that we're in, which can be quite confronting. Like the ways in which we might make ourselves sick or replay certain scenarios. But it also it's just really empowering. How much we can change and achieve. And I think that brings a lot of wakefulness with itself. And I think that's also what I learned. How can I actually be awake to what really matters, to how I want to show out, more of reality. And what else is there is mostly feel joy right now. It's really good to be alive. It's really good to meet people and keep learning. Yeah, I think that's the basis of the work I do. I mostly want to be present with people with what it's actually like. I think this is where circling really comes in. Of we don't actually need to change. Don't actually need to constantly, like, even if it's just like regulate our nervous system or start doing things or try to connect or relax more intentionally or any of these things. It's a lot of like non-doing. I actually just want to be with people with what it's like for me and them. And as long as I do that, it feels really restorative. And like reality actually takes care of itself in a way, as long as I show up wholeheartedly and awake.
I'm remembering that you said that there was a time where the doctors told your parents to prepare for you might not ever be able to work, and that actually changed, and your health got better, and you've learned so much and changed so much and grown so much, and now you can work. And um, what is the work that you have found yourself doing? How would you describe the work that you do?
Yeah. Um, I work from presence, built my own company called Into Presence. Um, Part of that is group work, a lot of circling, a lot of relational practices, embodiment. I lead weekends, a lot of Swana leadership, and being present with each other, with ourselves, and what it's actually like. Courses so that it feels like just different time formats. So I'm assisting, being on the team of a lot of 6 months circling leader trainings as well. So just, yeah, whether that's one day, an evening, or a weekend, or like 6 months, like it just goes deeper and deeper into being present with people together. And then there's also teaching. Just there are actually quite a lot of skills we can practice. And in one way, it's super simple. Like everyone actually knows how to be present and be present with each other and knows how to love someone. It's incredibly simple. And at the same time, I'm really into the skills that we can actually practice of becoming more and more skillful at truth telling, at feeling ourselves, relating. And then a big chunk of my work is individual work, which is, I think the reason people come to me is because I'm willing to actually be present with them and what I'm sensing. So a lot of my work is actually that I'm willing to sense my own suffering and someone else's suffering when I'm present with them. And also their gifts, of course. Like usually it takes a bit more willingness with the suffering, and then it feels like just clearly seeing what is there. And I'm just always holding the potential of things being able to be different, but not the different that comes from, oh, let's try it, let's create this thing, and let's create a vision board. No, it's more like what's already there that actually just, as soon as we become aware and just let things be, they start unfolding in this effortless way. And there's almost like there's this engine that keeps running forever if you just let it. Which also means we will never actually burn out, because things are just unfolding. We're not actually creating or doing them. So yeah, my individual work's probably somewhere between coaching, therapy, and circling people through presence.
And if someone felt called to work with you, what ways do they have available to work with you, or yeah, what services do you offer?
There are a couple of different entry points. Some people are just really excited about circling, so they go on these circling trainings, circling weekends, and start working with me in that way. On the circling retreats, some people come through more individual work. Yeah, usually one of these two.
Mm.
I think one good way that I see is this is how I pick my practitioners or the people I work with. If somebody likes the way I am in the world and finds something inspiring in that, that's a good indicator that, yeah, come, let's have a call and we can probably do something.
Mm-hmm. 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 I'd like to ask you one more question for now. Um, as I mentioned to you in our intermission, I'm aware of my battery, which I've not had charging for much of the conversation. So I think we'll be able to ask this one question and then have some conversation after that. Um, and this is all the questions I've asked you so far are like simple or straightforward questions, and this one's a little bit more complex. So bear with me. Um, as you know, I'm writing a novel right now, and it has 3 acts. And uh, sometimes I like to think of people's lives as having 3 acts also. And for myself, I feel like I'm, from that perspective, I'm at the beginning, still in the early years of my second act. And, uh, it's something like 30, 33 years each per act. And um, you following so far? Does all make sense so
I
far?
am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so my question is, if you just put on this lens, let's assume you live till 80 or 90, okay? Let's, God willing. I hope you live a long life. I'm praying for it, for us both. And I hope we're friends for many years, for the rest of our lives. I always ever want to just be friends with people for the rest of our lives. I don't, maybe it has to not be that way in certain cases, but that's what I want. But anyway, let's assume you live till 80 or 90, live a long, full life. Um, and everything that you answered when I asked you about your life so far was basically act one. Okay. Uh, what would you hope or pray for yourself, for the character that you described of Marei for act two and act three? Like it could be specifics if you want, but more like qualities, especially, like peace or happiness or wisdom. Feel free to add specifics too of a family or this or that, but um, what would you hope or pray for acts two and three for your life?
I like that question a lot. Um, immediately I'm curious about yours as well, your response. Um, Act one was getting my shit together and getting like literally just doing detox mentally, spiritually, psychologically, all of that. Getting like almost like just taking away and just like stabilizing so that the tensions aren't there, but I can actually start gaining muscle without the tension. And act two, there's a lot of work. I'm starting to play bigger, bigger ambitions, and work is incredibly meaningful to me. So there's a sense of this is why I like working with groups as well. It's like, oh, I just needed like 30 years to like work on my nervous system and get healthy. But I always had to get healthy so that I can do the work. Health itself isn't actually like, why would want to get old? Like, I mostly just want to be really fit in all the senses of that word, so that I can handle a lot of complexity and be of service to that. Um, which the complexity often comes in is like, yeah, I want to be really willing to feel um, depth of suffering when I'm with people with really, yeah, it, we can really go through hell actually, and keep finding trust there. And um, the amount of conflicts or tensions or polarization and all that is there, like that often that I would see in Sonic leadership, those tensions come out. Like things are, like look at them and I'm like, shit, I don't know how to bridge that gap. But like, I want to be fit enough to just stand in that complexity so that I can stand there long enough until love bridges it. Um, so I want to be fit to do a lot of work, really, because I really, really care about it and feel really excited for it and be of service. I want to have a lot of time with friends just, and teachers. That's, and I guess people I'm teaching, like that level of intimacy is just really incredibly meaningful to me. And to show up repeatedly in relationships, intimacy, what I really mean is like just with what it's actually like even when it's uncomfortable, and particularly when you know someone. Like let's imagine we've known each other like in the future for like 10 plus years or something. It can be quite uncomfortable, like really showing up. And that's what I want. Like showing up for each other, really walking each other through this life is what I want. And I think it also really shows that I want that for like a marriage or a relationship. Um I And yeah, I say marriage, like I want that for a partner and family and kids and all that. And I really care about these lifelong spiritual friends or like these friendships. Like spiritual friends never quite make sense to me. Every friend I have, spirituality or like a shared commitment to God or something bigger seems to really be part of it. And I love that I work with my friends and these aspects like really where I want to show up. Um, I think second act is also really trusting. Like I've absorbed a lot of teachings, and I still love at times in my life, not always, to just read a lot, study a lot. I love, yeah, at the moment getting up in the morning and just studying a couple of hours. And it's also just trusting myself more and trusting, like not actually studying because of this, because of our perceived inadequacy here. Just really going deep, and that's actually quite scary. Instead of looking out there, to just it's all in here. So I want more of that as well. Meeting people seems right. Being able to follow invitations, just go deeper on everything. Right? Friends is definitely a big one. So, the time we just had was incredible. Just being able to do that. Yeah. I feel a bit of shyness saying some of these things, which I think just really shows how it's true. And it's a
Mm.
next new thing to grow into.
Mm.
I would be curious, what do you second act is?
Mm. Mm. Well, thank you for answering, and I loved your answer, and uh, I hope those things all come to pass. I have confidence they will, and um, I'm also pleased. This is a bit of a meta note, but I think one of the things I get to learn through this podcast as a container is how to ask questions, and some of my questions are quite simple, and some of them uh, are complex or strange, or I've never asked a question like that before, or people haven't heard them before, and um, I feel pleased with both how I asked that question and how you received it. So thank you. Um, yeah, I think my first act in some ways was completed with leaving the monastery and starting my pilgrimage, and then um, the process that led to me tattooing my body. Um, I think also with receiving my name, Tasshin, it's like that whole arc of receiving my name to leaving the monastery to starting my pilgrimage to asking the kinds of questions that led to me tattooing love, curiosity, and empowerment to my body. And then from there, starting what became the Service Guild. That felt like the completion of Act One and the start of Act Two. And I want to live up to that invocation in Act Two, especially, and live my name and live my tattoos and embody love and embody curiosity and embody empowerment and create the Service Guild. It's existed for 3.5 years at this point, and it's like a toddler. And so I want to see it into its teenage years and its adulthood and um, be a good parent to it and take care of myself physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, energetically, interpersonally, financially, so that I can live a long life and uh, be of benefit for many years. And um, I think that for me, the Bodhisattva vows were a lot about deciding to let this life be of service. And I've spent the last years learning how to be of service in a way that is Tasshin shaped. And it's time to double down on that and go as far as I can with that for as long as I can. And so I think Act Two is especially about the Service Guild and being the guild master or the guild father or the creator of this organization and learning how to do that year after year and at bigger and bigger scales, hopefully growing it and letting it grow at a natural speed where it's not too fast or not too slow, not rushing, not hesitating, um, both directing it and allowing it to become something that I didn't expect, um, receiving energies from the world that want to feed it and guide it and direct it. Um,
Yeah.
I think that's a lot also about my own development and my own education and becoming a fuller person, becoming an adult and a leader. And there's so many different domains of life that I've had a taste of now that I would like to deepen into and deepen with my writing or my art or my music or conversations or all of these things. These are like art forms or mediums that I've have some skill in and some basis in, and I would like to deepen into. Right, certainly writing books, but also novels and fiction. Um, and then I think Act Three would be about elderhood and from the vantage point of having lived that full life. Like, of course, a lot of it already is about helping other people and supporting people, but about mentorship and being a leader at a larger scale, beyond just my organization or my neighborhood or something or my immediate friends, but caring about our planet and our species and I hope at that point our solar system um, and all beings and all realms. Like I hope to deepen in wisdom during this time. And I think in retrospect, a lot of my meditation training and monastic training was actually about my own psychology and my emotions and um, basic life skills and concentration. To the extent that I deepened in meditation, it was concentrated. I don't think I'm amazing at concentration, but I gained some skill in that, and really not so much about insight or awakening or wisdom, relatively speaking, for how many hours I spent meditating. Um, and so I hope to deepen in that in the coming years. And uh, yeah, I don't know what will be possible from say 30 years from now of living like that, but I would want it to be about elderhood and service and a broader scope of service than is possible for me now. Um, that's my prayer in this moment. Yeah.
Yeah. I got a sense of wanting you to receive the depth of curiosity, love, and empowerment.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the world gives us what we give out, and it comes back to us a thousandfold, and then we can give even more of it. And that reminds me, actually, I'd love to tell you, I think I may have mentioned this at some point, but it'd be nice to have it on record, which is how to explain this thought. I've had this sense of prayer, this different sense of prayer that's not quite like how anyone explained it to me. There's a lot of forms of prayer, just like you said with meditation or circling, but this is one form of prayer I've really come to like recently, which is I'm remembering being a child, and I'm not sure this happened quite so much, but you could imagine being a child and asking your parent for a specific type of bedtime story. Like, I want a story that involves castles and dragons and knights, and it has to be a happy story and but funny too. And just being like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 and asking for a specific type of story at bedtime. And I've been relating sometimes to prayer as that, where it's like where my life is the story and just praying. There's a prayer that my life is a good story and a happy story and that it ends well, and that if I make mistakes or hurt people or do things I regret, um, that there's some benefit from that and that I learn from it and that I am forgiven for my mistakes and that I'm a hero. I want to be a hero and not a villain, and you know, help people more than I hurt people and things like that. Um, that's my prayer also, because I could imagine forms of the story for my rest of my life that I'm kind of scared of and don't want to happen. And if they happen, then that's what happens. But I would prefer to live a beautiful life and a noble life and a good life and a happy life, and um, that any difficulties are ones that I learn from or that the world benefits from in the end. And that's the kind of story I like. I like happy stories, and I want my life to be a story like that. Like, it's not like there can't be challenges or mistakes or problems, but that they're not just like pointless or that they don't mar the whole thing or something like that. That's my prayer also.
Yeah. Which I get curious. I've gotten that sometimes with you. Like I get drawn in by that fear somehow. Like it seems a bit foreign to me. It's like, why would you be worried? Or like, how could it not? Like you're so focused on being good. How could it not? Something, but um, I think I would want to be present in that fear with you.
I think the fear comes from two sources. One is a sense of history and um, a sense of what lives have been lived that I know about and ways that they've, like, for example, just to give a simple example, I think a lot of people who devote their lives to love, like really, truly for years, not always, it's not guaranteed, but many such people have been assassinated, for example. And I would prefer to not have my life end with assassination. That would be a preference. Um, I think there's a way in which, like, if you really truly embody love, that's actually a very radical act for society, and society itself becomes threatened by it. Um, and there are people who become very scared of that and who consider you a threat because you really are a threat to what does not embody love, and that's destabilizing in some ways. Um, or there are other things like that that I could imagine. Um, or certainly for the world at large, like there could be war or sickness or so on. And then personally, some people that I've really loved that have been heroes or mentors for me, people that I've really learned deeply from. It's like maybe they made choices that I wouldn't want to make myself, or they made mistakes that I would prefer not to make myself. And so it comes from some lived experience also.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I get touched by the mistakes quite a lot actually. Wow, this is a real chance for humility or the imperfection. And just oh wow, like this is a yeah. When I have it when I'm leading, it's like wow, this is really uncomfortable, especially if there's something I was unconscious about, and then I start becoming conscious. It's just like so shameful, but it's also a really strong experience of how it usually starts with humiliating, which I actually kind of like, but it turns more into like humbling. Like, wow, yeah, I'm so human. I think this is also what I get when people get sacrificed. It's like, yeah, the Jesus archetype of like, wow, like he's the son of God, and he still gets like sacrificed like that, or like, wow, it's just really, really humbling to acknowledge how human we are, even when we stand up for love or like devote our whole life to that. Um, I find it quite heart-opening as well. Get excited about your mistakes almost.
Well, you're a kind friend to me in this way. Uh, yeah. I think my best friends are people who, and really a best friend in general, like a really good friend is one who has unconditional love and embodies unconditional love. And it's not that they abandon their own needs or preferences or boundaries, but they have space for you to be a full human and be imperfect. And there are a lot of relationships where that might not be the case, where someone doesn't have that space or patience or perspective. And so it makes me feel very safe in our friendship in that way because I think you embody that. And um, I'm grateful for the friendships where I feel that so
Yeah.
acutely.
And I think that those moments are incredibly important. Like, that's
Hmm.
where real leadership or the real love really shows up. It's like,
Hmm.
it's really easy. Like, when things are peaceful, it's very easy to embody love, actually.
Hmm.
Like, what happens, like, when we make a mistake or when we get really touched by shame or
Hmm.
our sense of smallness, or,
Hmm.
yeah, it's a really good practice moment.
Hmm. It's true. Yeah, I think there's something there about the rate of change or the rate of learning, or I would pray to learn at a pace that was that I could metabolize well, you know. Um, it's like I'm willing to make mistakes. I'm willing to um, be humbled. I'm willing to be experience humiliation. I'm willing to experience shame. I'm willing to apologize. I'm willing to tell someone the truth. I'm willing to listen to the impacts I've had on people. But I would request and prefer that I learn at a rate that doesn't break me or that isn't too much for me to handle. And I think that's a really important intention I have with leadership for the Service Guild, especially, is to grow it at a rate that like I don't quite know how to describe this, but I've seen some organizations that I've really loved, I think, grow too quickly, where they expanded the number of people or their responsibilities or their budget or the scope of what they were trying to do too quickly. And that meant that they opened themselves up to making mistakes that um, I think were unnecessary, like unforced errors, you might say, strategically. And so I want to grow the sense of it that's come to me is like, is this still a scale where I can have a one-on-one conversation with everyone I'm working directly with, and where I can really listen to each person and I can hear their perspective, and where I can hear about how I may have impacted them, and um, have a real relationship with each person. And I'm not interested in, like, a startup, for example, is often doubling or tripling or quadrupling every year or something, and that's reasonable for a commercial venture. But I want to keep the rate of growth quite small for the Service Guild, and especially in terms of people or money, um, but not necessarily impact. I think you can scale impact while keeping the number of people or the budget or something at a like a linear rate of growth.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can sense that, like the trust or the natural timing. And then sometimes there's, yeah, like the mistakes get bigger, the bigger responsibility and the more power we have. And then sometimes we have to break or something, with
Hmm.
not being constantly just thrown into that water. Um, Impact also, I think I'm getting a picture of impact as like that being power, and just like sometimes we can't quite scale it because impacts. Sometimes it's surprising to me when I lead what actually has impact. I'm like, I'm thinking I'm doing a thing, and then I hear what people are impacted by and like really changed by. I'm like, really? That that is the thing you still remember 5 years later?
Hmm.
It's the way I showed up when I like really messed up. Um, so I just feel a lot of respect for the unpredictability of impact, or like what really actually changes people, and that it's. I think actually the more truthful we show up, that actually seems to have the biggest impact on my experience. And really truthful might be when we're like breaking down and I'm like, fuck, I really messed up here.
Mm.
And I'm just, oh, I maybe I lied or like didn't acknowledge it at first, and I have to show up for that as well. And imagining that could actually have like the biggest impact rather than like your big project or something.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel a sense of safety from the practice of telling the truth and just um, to the best of my ability telling the truth and being honest in private conversation and public writing and public speech. Um, Being like, yeah, that happened, or I made that choice, or I made that mistake, and I would do this differently. And um, I think you're absolutely right about that. Yeah, it feels like a guard or like a protection for me. It's like, well, whatever happens, if I'm willing to tell the truth about it, then it will heal well. It's like a wound that heals well. Like you can injure yourself, but if you take care of the wound, then the body knows how to heal and things will come back to health and stability. And I think the truth is the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's how I see like self leadership or integrity of like, oh, if I show up the way I want to show up and I'm in conflict with someone, and like I might have an experience of them transgressing my boundary or something. As long as I show up in integrity, I can't actually make the conflict go away. And like the other person might just choose to keep doing it, even though I think I'm out of the naivety where I'm like, if I just show up with love, we're gonna be friends. No, like sometimes that's not possible. But it's my healing is actually clean, or like I can actually heal if I've shown up in integrity, or maybe I didn't, and then I show up in integrity and just really acknowledging that. That means I can actually like the wound heals cleanly.
Hmm.
If I step out of then the healing, like, oh, there's this yellow crust coming again and again, and then rip it off, and it's just never quite healed. I think that's how I would see it. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
how are we doing on your battery life?
Have 11% left. So, um, yeah, is there anything that you'd like to make sure to talk about or that you'd like to converse about while we're still here?
I got some, I got more excitement or like hunger somehow. Let me see what that is. Um, not quite sure what it actually points to, but it has like wanting to talk more, maybe just really enjoying the actual talking rather than me explaining my life. Or
For me, that corresponds to a phrase that's come up as like an acute sense of symmetry. I feel like my body is speaking that phrase, not my mind, but um, a kind of satisfaction in the way that you've lived your life. I feel proud of the way you've lived your life and grateful for all the things you've learned. And I'm grateful you're still alive, you know, and that your illness didn't persist in a way that ended your life, but that you surmounted the difficulties and learned and grew from them. And um, how to put it? Yeah, I feel this sense of kinship in the different things that we've learned in our lives and like a fitting of it in that I'm grateful for the things I've learned and the challenges I've gone through and likewise hearing your life story and almost this sense of possibility of what's possible when our friendship puts those skills together and we'll see over the years what that looks like, but that feels that brings up that kind of hunger for me or that excitement or
Yeah.
sense of possibility.
Cool. Yeah, that's so clarifying to hear actually. I've been wondering, like, I think I felt quite touched just by feeling our second act. Or like, wow, like I actually want to think more about that. Like, I'm just at the edge of like being in it. And it's like, wait a minute. Like when you asked that question, I was like, that's how much is happening. Like right now I'm just kind of naming what are the next obvious steps, but it's like actually, holy shit, like anything. Like if I consider anything, like maybe I want more. Like how can I go to the edge of how good I'm actually willing to have it or how much I can receive? How like the Borderland effect it has, like, holy shit, we could actually like I used to be like, oh, we're just like weird hippies at the edge of society. I guess we just do with what we get. And it's like, no, we can actually do quite big projects. And like, I think I'm still also realizing like this is my actual proper work. Like this is I make good money with this and like awesome work. I love it. um, how important it is and still acknowledging the bigness of it or the importance and the realness. Um, my life, I've been sick and all that, or my childhood, there were like difficult aspects, so like really had to clean up a lot, really did a lot of inner work in my 20s. But also it's been really fucking good actually. It's also the truth that I really don't want to make smaller. Like I've had so many moments of just sitting around and being like, holy shit, like I don't know what decisions ended up like that led me to this point, but I'm just looking around and like, this is better than I ever, like anyone, nobody ever told me it could get this good. And if this is only my 20s, I mean, I'm going to crash really hard at times as well. I know that is true. Um, but like how meaningful it's been. And I imagine we both have that. Like, we've been surrounded by incredibly, I'm going to speak we and like see if this matches.
Hmm.
Just having been surrounded by incredible people and keep getting surrounded by inspiring people, lots of love, really good times with friends, um, just a lot of aliveness. I think this is when I know that I'm on track. And what I haven't spoken about, I guess, is the healing potential of life force. I had some of these waking up moments. It's like connecting back to my life force that when I was a child, I was like, this is too sexual, this is too weird. It's actually connecting back to that and the erotic nature that usually makes me eat healthier, suddenly releases a lot of my chronic pain. Like I've been subtly um a little bit fatigued the last week because I'm in this strong detox. And then I went dancing last night and I played this awesome music. And it was just like a room full of like 300, 400 people sweating, feeling in their life force. It was really good music. And I feel better and I'm like less swollen and everything today.
Hmm.
And just the potential of joy or like life force, love, like the real hunger, the real being one energy moving something in this world. It's the best ever. It can really change things.
Hmm. Yes, I think so
Yeah.
much is possible for us in the years to come, both in our own lives individually and in our friendship. And I can taste what that might be like, even if I don't have a sense of the specifics necessarily.
What's the taste like?
Mm. Delight, abundance, friendship, growth, maturation, service, discovery, play, just tremendous benefit. I think so much. This is one of the things I taste for you in particular every time I'm around you. I'm like, I think, you said, like a lot of it has just been about, I forget the phrase used, but like cleaning up your own body and heart and mind and spiritually. And it's like from that vantage point, you've built this work where you can work with individual clients or small groups. And I think the thing I taste so consistently when we talk is, and what I want, what I yearn for, like hungry for is, I know with the things I've learned how to scale that to be of more benefit. And that's what I want. I'm like, the conversations we've had, and I know conversations you've had with other mutual friends that I've heard about secondhand, it's like you just being you, being present moves things for people and has moved things for me. And um, I want that to like a lighthouse beacon instead of just a candle or a lamp. It's like I want it to be a lighthouse that spreads out as far as it can go and goes where it wants to and offers that light to as many people as possible. And um, I know how to do that myself, and I want to offer that to you and see what happens when that light is offered to the world.
Yeah. I feel this is quite familiar. Like things click in. It feels like a turn on, or like suddenly like energy is flowing. And that is the experience right now. Like we all hunger for that. But, um, I think a lot of the work is actually we all have slightly different realities in which we learn that impossible things are possible. And like when I'm in Tasshin's world, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Things like it's almost like I have 5 more hands. So like suddenly, yeah, I've told you, I suddenly do things I didn't know I could. But that's a reality you give me a taste of.
Mm,
And I don't know, I seem to give people like a taste of a reality they thought wasn't even possible. Um, I like, yeah, I'd like to not just stick to what's possible when I dream. Like,
mm,
yeah, why would you do that? So much that I thought was impossible suddenly became possible. It's like I think we could just keep going actually in that
hmm
direction. Yeah.
And meanwhile, the whole world is also changing and making things possible. Like, and our friends are making things possible we don't know. It's like Lego. Like there are going to be blocks that we'll get to play with that we can't even imagine now. And when you put them together, that will create things that we couldn't imagine and that will have benefits we can't imagine. And um, that's what gets me up in the morning. I'm so excited to learn and to grow and to play and to see what all of that learning and growth and play creates for the world and what becomes possible when you put those out day after day, month after month, year after year. And um, I've so often in the last years had the delightful feeling of like something that I felt really called to intuitively years ago comes back at like from a new vantage point, a new perspective. Like I'm so glad I did that. I didn't understand it at the time, but it made this thing possible years later that um, is just even better than I could have imagined. And um, I think we'll get to do that a lot in our friendship. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true.
Mm.
I I think there's a right moment to ask the question, is it possible? But I just got this image that most people probably ask it too early.
Mm.
It's like, why would you ask the question now? Like it's not actually important yet. Like
Uh-huh.
let's just see like if you don't ask that question, like where would you want to go? And I think that it feels more like that opens up light for us. And then like usually it's possible anyways what we want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like a dog
Mm.
or a horse.
Yeah, you can imagine 10 years old and you suddenly get a pony and it's like, what? How?
I had this
Yeah.
sense as you were telling that part of your story that like you in your childhood heart with the virtues you already had, like wanted a dog and a pony so clearly that even though there was inertia and resistance and friction in the world outside you, that like you just wanted it so clearly that the world couldn't resist, and like, you know, your mom changing her mind suddenly. It's like, no, I don't think we're getting a bird, we're getting a dog, and you're like, oh, I guess I have a dog now. Like, I think already at 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, you already had that. I recognize that from other, especially women. I think my experience is if women want something, like certain women who are connected to their wisdom and their power, it's just like it happens, you know, it just happens. Yeah. I think the bodhisattva vows are like that, that if you want something that actually is wholesome and is of benefit and is aligned with service and it really benefits all beings without harming them, the whole universe and all beings conspire to help you with that. Even if it takes time, it often takes longer than you expect or comes about in ways that you don't expect. But that's been my experience again and again, that it's like, if I want something, yeah, even something that benefits me or brings me joy, if it's wholesome and beneficial to myself and others, then it comes about in due time.
Yeah. 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 If people really want something, like I'm generally interested when I ask that question. I don't trust what people tell me they want.
Hmm.
Like the first 3 minutes of like, like what they think they want. But if they really tell me what they want, and usually that's quite felt, and the body is
Hmm.
like, oh, now we're talking. Um, I think people usually get what they want often, or surprisingly often, if they dare to stay there.
Hmm.
It's a bit scary saying that.
Well,
Yeah.
in some ways, I mean, I really think time is weird, and in some ways, I think our desires are matching what time will give us in the future. It's like there's a precognition about it. It's like, yeah, this is coming, and the desire is the sense of that. I don't know. That might be off the woo deep end, but that's really how I experience it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the things we really want are often not quite comfortable. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
like, I think I see it as we seem to get what we really want, but not just everything we want.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I'm gonna close us out there, if only because of my battery. I so enjoyed this conversation, and um, you've been so generous with your time and with your heart and telling your story and with answering my questions. And I think this was a really special conversation, one I'm proud of, and I'm proud of you, the way you've lived your life, and I'm grateful to know you. And it feels like such a privilege to have you in my life, and I really believe it's a gift to share a conversation like this with the world. So thank you for having it with me and for taking the time and being so honest and earnest in how you've shown up. I really appreciate it.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. It's always good talking to you, and I'm curious of hearing any impact of anyone who listens to this, you or anyone else, really. Yeah.
Hmm. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you, Marei.